Okay, so uh, hello everyone. This is Siddiqui from Scientia magazine, and today we have invited renowned journalist and columnist Zarrar Khuhro. Zarrar has a diverse experience of writing and hosting shows. Zarrar uh, hosts his own show at Dawn, Zara Hut Kay. Uh, and more importantly, the reason we invited him, he has been very inclusive about science within his segments, and he has been talking about a lot of science issues, social science issues, and a broad range of topics from everywhere. And his writing have been posted in Tribune, Dawn, Al Jazeera, and everywhere. And he's very vocal on Twitter and on every social issue and raising his voice for everything. Thank you, Zarrar, for joining us. We are really, it's really an honor to host you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. So I'll just get to it. पहले जरा एक दो disclaimers मैंने देने हैं. My glasses just broke because I sat on them. तो अगर मैं यूं देख रहा हूँ स्क्रीन की तरफ तो इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि मतलब हाँ इसका ये मतलब है कि मैं इस वक्त अंधा हूँ. दूसरी बात है कि कराची में यहाँ पे कल रात बारिश हुई है और हमारा थोड़ा सा पतला खून होता है, हमारे से सर्दी बर्दाश्त नहीं होती. So I've gotten a bit of a cold. तो अगर बीच में मैं खांसने लग गया तो please just let it go. Now when it comes to since we're talking about writing, and it's always been a passion of mine, I've always been a huge nerd since I was a little child. Right now I'm going to be talking to you guys also from the point of view of an editor. I've been an editor of various publications in various capacities, Express Tribune mein, Dawn mein, kafi jagahon mein. And editors are very mean people. Okay, you have to understand that. But we're mean to try and make you better and to make sure that the final product that goes on our pages is as good as it can get. हमारे दिल की जगह पत्थर होता है और हमारे रगों में खून नहीं होता, बर्फ दौड़ रही होती है. तो just please bear that in mind. So if it's some of the things I have to say sound harsh, it's never personal, it's only business. Now this module is, of course, as it was explained to me, on science writing. Now that is obviously a very vast field. We'll come to that. I'm going to talk to you about I'm going to talk to you about tips and tricks, and I'm assuming that most people attending here will have questions. Would be more than happy to talk to you about those, answer whatever queries you have, and especially about, say, how to get published, right? But first, I'd like to share with you some basic tips and tricks I've learned throughout my slightly successful writing career. Okay? There are always rules, and all rules can be broken. But before you can break the rules, you have to know what the rules are. And as far as I'm concerned, the first rule, the golden rule, जो आपके माथे के ऊपर लिखा होना चाहिए in reversed image, so every time you look in the mirror, you see it. It's just 3 words: read, read, read. It's simple. To be a writer, you have to read. There is no shortcut to this, G. There is no way around it. A person who does not read, और ये मैं अपने बेटे को हमेशा बता रहा होता हूँ कि यार ये देखो इतनी किताबें तुम्हारे घर में पड़ी हुई हैं, खुदा खौफ करो और पढ़ लो. A person who does not read has no advantage over a person who cannot read. अगर आप पढ़ते नहीं है तो इसका मतलब है कि आप में और आप किसी अनपढ़ शख्स में कोई फर्क नहीं है. So use that. Now, if you want to write, you have to read all the time. Okay, I spend hours every day reading. Read good writers and also read bad writers. Good writers so that you know what to do, and bad writers so that you know what not to do, right? And read beyond your genre. I mean, zaruri nahi hai ki if you're interested in social sciences, and even that's a vast field. I mean, what do we even mean when we say social sciences? Or you're interested purely in the economy, or you're interested purely in politics. That doesn't mean you just read economists or political analysts or sociologists. Read beyond your genre. Read modern and classical authors too. आप शेक्सपियर भी पढ़े जी. मैं तो कहता हूँ आप स्टीफन किंग पढ़े, आप रॉबर्ट जॉर्डन पढ़े. Read fantasy literature. Why? Because that will teach you the architecture of writing. Okay? Now I'm going to teach you a trick which I wish somebody had taught me much earlier on. When you find a piece of writing that you really admire, don't just read it and be like, wow, yaar, kash main aisa likh sakta. बिल्कुल, ये तो हमेशा होना चाहिए. I mean, you should always be humble. You should always know that whatever you write, you can always have done better. When you find that piece of writing and you really admire it, copy it. अब इसका मैं ये मतलब नहीं है कि आप इसको कॉपी पेस्ट करके छाप दें अपने नाम के साथ, थोड़ा सा ऊपर नीचे करके रीराइट करके, नहीं. ये गुनाह है हमारी शोभे में, ठीक है. What I mean is literally copy it out by hand, word to word, or on a computer, whatever you prefer. I've always preferred pen on paper for the first draft. Like, that's entirely up to you. Write it out word for word. Why? Because this will take you inside the writer's head, inside his or her process, and you will be the better for it. You will understand if this person has used a metaphor, right? Whatever kind of a metaphor, how has he built up to it? How does that then take the story forward? Because understand, whatever you're writing, yeah, आप blog लिख रहे हो, आप even if you're writing a restaurant review, let's say you're writing a food review, you're writing about के गोभी गोश्त कैसे बनाते हैं, you are telling a story. Writers are storytellers, and that is why I say read fiction. Read history, read everything, so that you learn the basic trick to how to tell a story. And if you can master this, honestly, half the time people don't even care what you've written, so long as you've written it well. Okay, I'm not giving that as advice. It's just a statement of fact. Now, another rule. You have to write clearly. Okay, I have seen so many people, they have so much information in their mind, लेकिन वो कन्वे ही नहीं कर सकते. तो फिर क्या फायदा हुआ? मैं आपकी खोपड़ी खोल के उसके अंदर तो नहीं देख रहा ना कि यार मुजम्मिल साहब क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं. मैं वो पढ़ रहा हूं जो मुजम्मिल साहब कह रहे हैं, जो उन्होंने लिखा है. एंड समटाइम मुजम्मिल भाई कांट थिंक क्लियरली. मुजम्मिल भाई के पास इतनी इंफॉर्मेशन है कि उसको समझ ही नहीं आती कि मैं इसको पेज पे कैसे डालूं. और फिर मुजम्मिल भाई को एक और ठरक भी है. If any of you are named Muzammil, I'm not picking you out. It's just I could have gone with Abdul Ghafoor or Merunisa also, but let's stick with Muzammil for for the purposes of this discussion. एक और जो मसला होता है मुजम्मिल भाई के साथ, वो ये होता है कि मैं यार इस बंदा जो पढ़ रहा है ना, मैं उसको दिखाऊं कि यार मैं कितना ब्रिलियंट हूं. No one cares. No one cares how brilliant you are. No one cares how much you know. People only care what you can convey. So you have to write clearly. And how do you write clearly if you're not thinking clearly? So before you sit down to write, you want to think very clearly कि यार मैं कहना क्या चाह रहा हूं. You want to come out with at least a rough outline. ठीक है? Now the best outline, most of the time, even the best outline will not be stuck to. Okay, why? Because General Patton, right? Very famous American general in World War II. He said that the best plan of battle only can never survive first contact with the enemy. Right? You can make all the plans you want, लेकिन एक दफा जब जंग शुरू होगी और आपकी जंग इसमें है, when you start writing the article, all your plans will go haywire. Plans are useless, but planning is essential. That's another quote from General Patton. It's a good one. Remember it always. So first, before you write, take some time, breathe deeply, and think about what you want to say, how you want to say it, and why on earth do you even want to say it. ठीक है? Now, when you're doing it, एक और जो हमारे यहाँ जो particularly पाकिस्तान में और इनफैक्ट जनूबी एशिया में एक जो बहुत बड़ा हमारा अलमिया है कि we feel that the bigger the word we use, the better our writing is. No, it's not. ठीक है? सबसे पहले एक और चीज, and another great piece of advice I was given to one of my first editors was you are writing for Homer Simpson. आप Homer Simpson को जानते हैं? अगर आपने Simpsons नहीं देखी तो प्लीज देखा करें. Homer Simpson is the person you're writing to. You cannot assume, unless of course you are writing in some really really high class technical journal, आपको पता है कि भाई जिस बंदे ने पढ़ना है वो भी PhD है, मैं भी PhD हूँ, then you can get away with it. Okay, I've got my new pair of glasses, so now I can see things clearly. That's wonderful. पूरी दुनिया मेरी एकदम से साफ हो गई है. But otherwise, don't assume that your writer knows anything, your reader knows anything. This does not mean that you're condescending to your reader. It means that you're being kind to him. So first of all, if somebody is, you don't have to use 10 words where 3 will suffice. You don't have to say कि यार मैं अपनी डिक्शनरी या thesaurus खोलूं And if I want to say that something is beautiful, I don't have to find the most difficult way of saying that. When you do that, you lose your reader. In fact, because you're condescending to your reader, you're talking down to your reader. So the other thing that goes along with it is avoid excessive use of jargon. If you have to use jargon, explain it clearly. I always prefer to keep a conversational tone in my writing. But again, मैं एक और चीज आपको यहाँ पे वाज़ेह कर दूं, because there are so many different genres of writing, there are so many different publications. You're going to be tailoring what you're writing to the publication you're writing for. We're going to come down to that. We're going to come back to that later. Okay. Generally avoid cliches. Okay. Why should you avoid cliches? If 20 people are using the exact same terminology to explain what you're explaining, please try to find a new way to explain it. You know, like if it, for example, जैसे लोग कहते हैं, it goes without saying that. Oh, bhai, if it goes without saying, why are you saying it? I mean, does that make any sense? We use these terms reflexively. जैसे आप अगर किसी इवेंट में जाएं, आपने कितनी दफा ये सुना होगा, ये जो साहब है ये किसी तारुफ के मोहताज नहीं है, और फिर उसका फिर भी तारुफ कर देते हैं. भाई अगर तारुफ के मोहताज नहीं है तो फिर आप तारुफ कर क्यों रहे हैं? Right? We use words without actually thinking what those words mean and what they imply, and that makes writing stale. So avoid that. Cliches can be used. Great writers do use cliches, but they think about them first. They think about their impact, right? Which is why, going back to my earlier point, read, and then when you find something good, write it out, ताकि आप उसकी मैकेनिक्स समझ लें. You know, जैसे जो कुछ जो बहुत अच्छे इंजीनियर्स होते हैं, अगर आप उनसे पूछें कि यार how did you ever become an engineer, they're like यार बचपन में मुझे जो भी खिलौना मिलता था ना, मैं उसको खोल देता था, and then I used to put it back together. He wasn't just like me, ना कि यार रिमोट कंट्रोल गाड़ी है तो मैं इसको चला रहा हूँ. वो कहता था कि यार ये चलती कैसे है, right? And that is also what science writing is. Science is the search for the answer to the question why, right? We'll come to that. I'm jumping a little ahead. First, okay, so one other major rule. Okay, हम अब उस जमाने में हैं कि हमारी जो attention span है, और I include myself, I include most people, it's a generalization, but we'll have to go with it. एक TikTok video जितनी है. And when it comes to writing, what does that mean for us? It means that if you do not engage your reader in the first sentence, the first paragraph, you have not engaged the reader at all. He's gone. He will move on to something else. जब आप, if any of you have ever gone fishing, तो पहले आप क्या कहते हैं, डालते हैं पानी में? You put the hook in the water, right? That hook in this metaphor, right? Now this is an appropriate use of metaphor. That hook is your opening line. The fish is the reader. If you don't have a hook, you're not catching the fish. That means no one is reading you. That means you have failed as a writer. So how do you start? Start with something unusual. Start with something shocking, something that will grab attention. For example, if I'm writing on perhaps the prevalence of diabetes in Pakistan, I'll be like, 1 out of the 4 of you reading this is probably going to die of diabetes, right? I mean, all of a sudden you have someone's attention. कि यार ये क्या मेरी बात तो नहीं हो रही? Yeah, you start with a narrative, start with even a fictional story, something that puts the person in the middle of the scene that they can imagine. Because most of the time, like for example, I mean, and I'm sure you can identify with this. अगर एक article शुरू हो रहा है, on Saturday, the National Assembly convened for the 16th time, कौन पढ़ेगा? Right? It's not going to work. Start with a question, you know, because this is our nature. If you pose a question to us, we want to know what the answer is. So use that, use human nature, right? Or of course, you can even think of something, you know, completely original. But these are the things you have to do. But you also, sorry. इसीलिए मैंने आपको disclaimer दिया था कि बीच में मुझे खांसी भी आ सकती है. But also bear in mind that it can't just be something you've tagged on for shock effect. It has to flow with the rest of the article. You have to tell the story. So in the middle, what do you do? For example, if you're writing about science, think about the idea first. What are you trying to explain? If you're using an analogy, analogies are good, metaphors are good, but don't mix them up. You know, like for example, you can't say, um, so and so came in and made such a good point that he hit it for a 6. ठीक है, आपने वो कर दिया, सही है. But then he did an own goal. Okay, मतलब कि उसने कोई गलती कर दी. Now you're using a cricket metaphor and then you're using a sports football metaphor. Right now that is jarring. So be careful with that, right? It's a very dangerous tool. Now I'm going to give you some examples from a completely different genre and a completely different style of writing. I don't know if I'm hoping most of you are familiar with Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is an ancient Chinese general. मेरा ख्याल है कि कोई 3 या 3,500 साल पहले हमारे भाई पैदा हुए थे, फौत हो गए हैं. And he wrote a book called The Art of War, which is about military strategy, but it is also used as by CEOs. It's used as a management guideline, and in this case, right now, I'm using it for your benefit. ठीक है? अब संजू भाई ने काफी पते की बातें की थी. एक उसने कहा था कि to be successful in any engagement, okay, you have to know 3 things. 1, you must know yourself. 2, you must know your opponent, and 3, you must know the ground on which you fight. Now, how do we apply this to writing? Right? It's actually very simple. 1, you must know yourself. Kya matlab hai? You have to know your own capabilities and fields of interest. Now, I can try and write on the GDP or debt to GDP ratio or the problems with taxation in Pakistan. I don't know much about it, and but I could potentially research it and work on it. But I will never be able to do it as well as others with greater capabilities in their fields. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try and break out of your little barrier. But to begin with, and I'm assuming that you guys are relatively new writers, I would strongly suggest you start with what you know and what you're interested in. I hate the term passion. Okay, I think passion is overrated in this world. Now, when people say, do something you're passionate about, sometimes you can become passionate about what you do. I mean, that was the case with me. I didn't start out being passionate about journalism. It just happened to be the one job that I could get. Okay, but now I thoroughly enjoy my job, right? But in your case, I'd say, कि यार, matlab, you walk around, you look around, you see things in your day, you might ask the question, कि यार, why is this the way it is? Take that and use it. Take that and write on it. I'll give you a very small example. ठीक है? Again, थोड़ा सा side का example है, लेकिन bear with me. When I was first working in Jung Group, ठीक है, तो हम चंडीगढ़ रोड पे काम करते थे. अच्छा, वहां पर ज्यादा के हमारी तनख्वाह ज्यादा होती नहीं थी, तो जो भी हमें साइड पे खाना मिल रहा होता था, नीचे एक वो पठान का होटल था, वहां पे हमें काफी सस्ते फ्राई अंडे और पराठे मिल जाते थे. तो यूज्ड टू गो देयर एंड खाने के बाद, अब जाहिर है कि पराठे हैं, फ्राई अंडे हैं, तो देयर वाज तेल और ग्रीस ऑल ओवर आवर हैंड्स. तो हमें अखबार देता था हाथ साफ करने के लिए. अच्छा, हालांकि हम जंग अखबार की बिल्डिंग के नीचे बैठे हुए हैं, वो अखबार तुर्की से आती थी, या वो यूनान से आती थी, कभी कभी वो जर्मनी से आती थी. मैं सोचता था, मैंने कहा कि यार, ये एक, इसको हम नैपकिन की तरह इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. हाँ, यहाँ पर अखबारें ही अखबारें हैं, पूरी जंग है, द न्यूज है, जितनी डेली खबरें हैं. व्हाई आर दीज foreign newspapers, how have they reached us, and why are they being used as a wrapper? ठीक है, वो जो सामने वाला जो मूंगफली वाला बेच रहा होता था, वो भी किसी संडे यूके की संडे मैगजीन में था. So that was one of the first stories I started working on. मैंने कहा कि यार, मुझे पता करना है ये कैसे हुआ है, right? So it led to a whole chain कि यार, ये रद्दी में इंपोर्ट होते हैं वहां से, क्योंकि वहां पर इनकी कोई वैल्यू नहीं है, और ये यहाँ आते हैं, and they end up being cheaper for the raddi wala than the local things. So now it's not just, now if you start out the story, you can start it out with that thing कि यार, मैं अपने हाथ साफ कर रहा हूं and I see this, right? It's something that for 20, 30, 40 years people have been noticing, but nobody bothered to look into it, right? बिल्कुल इसी तरह आप देख लें कराची में या कहीं भी आप लंडे में जाएं, जैनब मार्केट में, where does it come from? Follow that chain, right? एक बड़ी मजेदार स्टोरी थी कि somebody actually यहाँ ही in some western country, they put a GPS tracker in one of the school bags. एंड उस स्कूल बैग की स्टोरी उन लोगों ने ट्रेस की. वो अमेरिका से गया चेकोस्लोवाकिया, चेकोस्लोवाकिया से वो गया अफ्रीका, अफ्रीका से वो पहुंच गया पाकिस्तान. Imagine what a story that is. I mean, I'm interested. I would, somebody pitches me a story like that, मैं पहला पैराग्राफ पढ़ के कहूंगा, सर, sold. I'm publishing this. ठीक है? So that is point number one. Okay, I've gone off track. I usually do that, so bear with me. Point number two, you must know your opponent. अब यहाँ पर by opponent I mean audience. इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि आप उनसे नफरत करते हैं, आप उनको तबाह करना चाह रहे हैं. It's just an analogy. So let's not take it too seriously. What this means is you have to know the audience you're writing for. What are you trying to tell them? What is their comprehension level? What are their interests and what do you want them to know? Because understand one thing, please. Okay. And again, Imran Aslam Saab, the late, great Imran Aslam Saab, who was my first employer and my first editor, he used to say this. He was like, Beta, there's only one person you're writing for. It's not you. It's not me either. It's not your editor. You write for your reader. और उसके साथ उसने ये भी कहा था कि आपने जितनी भी अच्छी स्टोरी लिखी है ना, कल उसमें पापड़ी बिक रहे होंगे. So be humble about it, right? So keep your reader in mind. You have to make sure that the person who has read your article walks away feeling like he's got something from it. He can, even if it's purely a rant, no matter what it is. Finally, third, the ground, you have to know the ground on which you engage. Okay? The ground is the publication you're writing for or that you intend to pitch to. You have to know what their tone and tenor is. Okay? Obviously, technical publication, will have a completely different approach. आप Dawn के op-ed column के लिए लिख रहे हैं, उसकी एक different approach होगी from Express Tribune blogs. I'm not saying one is better than the other, not at all. But one will prefer conversational, one will prefer serious. So before you pitch to any organization, you have to research the organization. You have to see if they have published something similar in the recent past. I mean, I'll give you an example. When I was the editor in the Dawn magazine or any place, for example, I'd get a lot of article submissions. And most of them, obviously, क्योंकि हमारा शौक ही यही है बदकिस्मती से कि हम सब अपने आप को political analyst समझते हैं ना, हम सब ने सियासत पे ही लिखना होता है, हम देख रहे होते हैं कि यार सब यही काम कर रहे हैं. Okay, so I'd get a lot of article submissions, and most of them would be political commentary. They would be badly written, they would be badly researched, pure opinion, and usually not even spell checked. And sometimes I'd reply to them and I'd say, yaar, have you read the paper that you're pitching to? Because if you had read it, then you would know, okay, I've published 3 articles like this in the week, which were much better written, much better researched, and much better edited. And most of them had not bothered to read the paper. उन्होंने कहा कि बस यार ये email मिल गई है, हमने डाल दिया. ठीक है? That's disrespectful. It's like you show up for a job interview और आपको ये भी नहीं पता कि वो कंपनी क्या जूते बनाती है या computer chips बनाती है. ठीक है? So do your homework, because if you're a writer and you're not doing your homework, that's it. You are not going to be a writer, period. Okay? Now, let's go on to some more specific rules. And I'm going to talk about now my own personal preferences as well. And when it comes to science writing. Now, again, it's a vast field. What is when jab Fauzi Saiba or Scientia walon ne se rabta kiya tha aur kaha tha ki ji, we want you to talk about science writing. My first question was, well, what does that even mean? Right? I mean, what isn't science really, right? It's a vast field. There are social sciences, there's tech. For me, that's science. For me, in many ways, making jalebis is science, right? It involves the viscosity of the oils. It involves the quality of the materials you are using. It involves a particular temperature that all those materials have to be cooked within that certain oil. तो मैंने कहा कि यार ये तो एक बहुत ही आपने मुझे बहुत मुश्किल काम दे दिया है, तो उसको मैं कैसे करूं? So I try to narrow it down to core principles. ठीक है? Again, the rule is KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Always keep it simple. Science is a search for solutions. It is the answer to the whys that have haunted humanity for all of its existence. Why does an object fall? If I throw this, why does it fall? When Newton asked that question, right? वो बैठा हुआ है बंदा, उसके सर के ऊपर सेब गिरा है, मेरे सर के ऊपर गिरता, मैं कहता हूँ फ्री सेब, मैं खा जाता. उसने कहा यार कि गिरा क्यों है भाई? And today everybody remembers Newton. Nobody's going to remember me. Okay. So the other question, अच्छा मैंने सेब खा लिया, okay, I digest the apple and eventually I go to the bathroom and there goes the apple or whatever's left of it. Okay, we do that every day 100 times. Why does that happen? So the great Muslim scientist Ibn Sina asked that question and answered it to a large part. How do I see? How does the eye see? Ibn Sina asked that question, and he got the answer to it. And today, when we talk about science writing, we are still in the search for solutions, and there are so many problems that need solutions. And it is our responsibility to tell the stories of those solutions and the stories of those seeking those solutions. Sometimes it's okay to just identify a problem. But for me, and I'm not putting my editor hat on, it is the search for solutions that makes for a good story. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. Okay? It doesn't have to change the world. None of us are going to change the world. Bear that in mind. हाँ, जब हमने शराफत शुरू की थी तो हमने कहा था कि यार बहुत फर्क पड़ेगा, ये होगा. In some places it has, but that is not something that you should be discouraged by, because वो कहते हैं ना कि कतरे कतरे से ही दरिया बनता है, कभी फिर सूख भी जाता है, कोई बात नहीं. It is the process that defines us, right? So it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It can be just fun. So I'm going to give you now a few examples of stories in Pakistan, because see that as an editor, that is what I'm interested in. ठीक है यार, मतलब कोरिया में इन लोगों ने एक चावल का दाना बना दिया है जिसके अंदर beef infused है. If you haven't read that story, read it. That's fantastic. But for me, if I want a story, I want it rooted in Pakistan. I want it identifying Pakistani solutions. यहाँ पर कल और पिछले 2 दिनों से पूरे मुल्क में बरसात हो रही है ना, ग्वादर डूब गया है, या हमारा जो डिफेंस हाउसिंग अथॉरिटी है, जो पाकिस्तान का सबसे हाई इनकम कच्ची आबादी है मेरी नजर में, वो डूब गई है, राइट? हाउ डू यू चेंज दैट? व्हाट डू यू डू अबाउट इट? There's a science solution to that as well. Look up the concept of sponge cities. Okay, we know that climate change is on our head. If we don't need any to be taught about that as well. No more articles are required on the danger posed by climate change. I have read a million of those. I start yawning if I even think about it. यार सबको पता है भाई, मुझे आप कोई हल दें, कोई प्रैक्टिकल सोल्यूशन दें, और ये ना कहें कि the government needs to do this. सबको पता है कि हुकूमत ने कुछ करना है. Right? I don't need you to tell me that, Muzammil bhai. Okay? I want you to give me a local solution. I want you to give me a small, an easier solution. अगर बरसात हो रही है, how do I harvest the rainwater? Okay? How do I make a model of a city that can absorb water? Okay? This is a concept of sponge cities globally. Look that up. कि हर शहर में एक ऐसे इलाके होने चाहिए, खुले इलाके, जो पानी को जज्ब कर ले. ठीक है? अंडर वाटर रेजर्वायर्स. यहाँ पर हमारे यहाँ एक अजीब मसला है ना, कि जब हमारे पास पानी आता है बहुत ज्यादा आता है, जब नहीं होता तो नहीं होता, फिर हम प्यासे बैठे होते हैं. Why can't we put these two problems together and have them solve each other? That is the story I want to read, yeah. Okay, okay, just jump to something else entirely. You know that Pakistan has possibly one of the highest rates of children with amputated limbs in the world. I mean, एक तो conflict हुआ है, आपने देखा है नॉर्थ वजीरिस्तान में people stepped on landmines. ठीक है, दही इलाकों में आप अक्सर देखते हैं कि वो जो चारे वाली मशीन होती है ना, जो चारा काटती है, तो बच्चे खेल रहे होते हैं, बिजली चली गई होती है, वो मशीन बंद हो गई होती है. ठीक है, जब ऑन होती है तो their hand gets caught in it, gets cut off. There are some children born without limbs, right? अच्छा, अब ये जो चारे वाली चीज है, अब इसके अंदर एक सोल्यूशन मैं आपको यहाँ पे भी देख सकता हूँ कि यार, what if someone were to develop a safety? Because I've seen videos of a machine when it detects a human finger, it just stops, right? So एक ये है. So there are all of these children with amputated limbs. Did you know कि यहाँ कराची में तारिक रोड पर there is a company, I have followed them since their inception in 2016. They make prosthetic limbs that are mind controlled. जैसे मैं अपने हाथ को इस वक्त हिला रहा हूं ना, and even individual fingers. उन्होंने क्या किया कि they took, वो शेरशाह गए यार कराची में, वो यहाँ पर जो स्क्रैप मार्केट है वहां पर गए, they took an ECG scanner, and because एक बच्चा था, his arm was only up until here, but the neurons, the nerves were working. They jumped the electrical signal from the nerves into the ECG scanner, into the robotic arm, and that child now has the ability to move their arm. ये अगर चीज आपको बाहर $10,000 में मिलती है ना, वो $2,000 में बना रहे हैं. Hardly anyone's ever heard of them. Why? Because nobody has bothered to tell that story. Okay, I did, and you should see them right now. उनके पास मतलब दर्जनों 3D printers बने हुए हैं. They can custom make the limb for you. You don't even have to be there. आप उनके ऐप के से 3D scanning कर सकते हैं. अभी हाल में पिछले हफ्ते they got 20 children down from across the country and fitted them with free prosthetic limbs. What a story that is. हाँ, ये बीबीसी के फ्रंट पेज पर क्यों नहीं आ सकती? आ सकती है अगर आप लिखेंगे तो, right? And I've always found, when I was finding the story of innovation, it comes from need. It comes from the question why. Why did it have to be like this? एक साहब है, and one of his loved ones, some lady very close to him, almost died from breast cancer because she was not diagnosed in time. अच्छा, अब अगर आप में से कोई, and breast cancer की incidence भी बहुत high है, so I'm sure that either yourself or someone you know has been suffered from breast cancer, been a survivor, perhaps lost their lives. यहाँ पर होता क्या है कि पहले एक एक्सरे ली जाती है. अच्छा, वो एक्सरे एक रेडियोलॉजिस्ट देखता है, ठीक है. अब नॉट एवरी रेडियोलॉजिस्ट इज द सेम. अगर मैं एक रेडियोलॉजिस्ट हो सकता है कि मेरी स्किल है कि यार मैं आपकी हड्डियां देख सकता हूँ कि यार हाँ, आपकी जरार भाई आपकी यहाँ से हड्डी टूटी हुई है, यहाँ से मेरी टूटी हुई है, वो ये देख लेगा. He will not be able to detect perhaps a mass, right? इस साहब के साथ यही हुआ. His wife had breast cancer. It was undiagnosed. She almost died. So he was an engineer, and he asked himself, he was like, yeah, how do I save other people's lives? So he came up with an AI program where if the human eye of a radiologist has the success rate of 40%, this program has a 98% success rate. Okay. He's marketing it. It's going to be released in the US. यहाँ पाकिस्तान में भी मेरा ख्याल है कि अल-शिफा और दूसरी जगहों में भी इस्तेमाल हो रहा है. And now he's taken that base technology and he is using it to detect arterial blockages. Imagine that. How is that not a story? एक और मैं आपको इसके आगे मिसाल देता हूँ. Final example, and then I will stop bothering. Oh, two more examples. Sorry. Autism. Right, I did a show on this just last year, and again, देखो ये जो चीजें होती हैं ना, आपको ढूंढनी पड़ती हैं. हाँ, rule of thumb in media is कि bad news will find you. जब एक बम फटता है ना, तो वो हर चैनल की हेडलाइन में फटेगा, वो हर अखबार की फ्रंट पेज पे फटेगा. Other stories you have to find. That is our job as writers. That is our job as journalists. If we do not do that job, we should not be in this field. We should make space for someone who is better at it than we are. Right? Autism is a huge and growing problem globally and in Pakistan as well. यहाँ पर अब तो बहुत awareness हो गई है, लेकिन एक वक्त था कि यार ये तो slow है, ये तो retarded है, इसको फेंक दो, right? So I met this person and he is a robotics engineer, okay? And I think he himself is slightly neurodivergent, okay? He's mild on the autism spectrum. And he made a robot because, you know, autistic children have trouble interacting, okay? वो उनकी नजरें नीचे होती हैं, they're very shy, they have very set ways, so they don't like to interact with people. So he made a robot that they can interact with, and LucoBot, it's called LucoBot, LuCobot. जाएं Google करें, check करें, you'll see what I mean. ठीक है? Urban solutions. I talked to you about sponge cities, right? Now here we have problem. What's our problem here? We are now increasingly food insecure also, ना? अच्छा, अब जैसे कराची शहर में एक दफा कोई कई साल पहले आप लोगों को यकीनन इस बात का इल्म होगा कि 400 से ज्यादा लोग मर गए थे गर्मी से. How do you tackle that? It's not that difficult. Urban forests. अच्छा, आप उन urban forests को बनाएं और उनकी क्यारियों में अगर आप सब्जियां उगाएं, you have created not only an urban forest, you have created an urban food bank, an urban garden. I've seen this around the world. They're community run. ठीक है? आपने देखा होगा कि फ्लाईओवर है. अगर उनके नीचे क्यारियां लगाई होती हैं आपने, फर्ज करें, there are even certain vines, certain creepers. हम हमारे गार्डन में आते हैं, हम उनको उठा के फेंक देते हैं because they're weeds, right? But they have the ability to absorb carbon monoxide from the air. What about those? जहां पर मलेरिया और डेंगू की बात हो रही होती है, why can't we look into the plant varieties that naturally repel mosquitoes? All of these are stories. ये मैं आपको free में दे रहा हूँ, ठीक है? Um, and then there are other ways to look at it. One thing that I was fascinated by, I'm a huge fan of history. I love reading about history. And one thing, आपने जंगेज खान का तो सुना होगा, right? Did you know that? And Vikings, you guys must. I mean, I love movies about Vikings. It fascinates me. Do you know that both of them were only able to conquer large parts of the world because of climate change? Because before Genghis Khan's came to power, there was what you call a heating period in Earth's history. उसकी वजह से बहुत ज्यादा बारिश हुई. बारिश की वजह से बहुत ज्यादा घास होगी, और इतनी घास होगी कि the number of horses multiplied. So, and eventually Genghis Khan used those horses to conquer to build the largest empire in world history. Climate change ना होता तो Genghis Khan ना होता. The Vikings used their boats. Again, there's a science to their boats as well, because they were so low that they could sail down rivers. But the Vikings were only able to do it because of the period of global warming, because all the ice in those rivers melted. In fact, I wrote an article on this as well. So I'm just putting this out as an example. Okay, once you start thinking about things, and the more you read, the more you will find that every single thing connects. So all of these things put together, I'm now at the end of what I had to talk about. And yeah, so I hope that helped. And if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to do it. Or ये मैं अब अपना वेप भी पीने वाला हूँ. Please don't do it. It's bad for your health. But अब मैं 50 साल का हो गया हूँ. जो होना था होना है, हो गया.
Okay, well, truly the examples were very well connected. I mean, to the practical part, since you laid out specifically what I just saw during the talk you gave, 7 to 8 stories. I mean, how we could look for stories everywhere. Okay, the stories
Yeah.
are everywhere. We just need to pick up them. And also, alternatively, what I like particularly, what we came to you for that, because mostly what people are covering the generic parts, hey, the politics, the mainstream stuff. But how
Yeah.
we can connect the daily life things with the bigger stories, such as you pointed out about the climate change. You pointed out about the limbs story, the akhbar story at the restaurant. So it was truly amazing. Let's go to questions. Please raise your hand and you may ask your questions. Who's first? Okay. Yes, Reba. Reba, you may ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Sir, it was a great talk. You explained
Thank
everything
you.
so well. I'm
Thank
actually in awe of it. I have a question. I just recently read your article on the recent incident in Lahore. This is not science related, but it's just something I picked up
Social
on.
science तो है ना एक
So,
class है. जी.
yes, the blasphemy one.
हाँ.
Can you explain a bit about because it's there's so much news about it, and how do you navigate through it to write a story and to connect the dots, everything together to basically generate one article?
Okay, my God. Okay, that's a really difficult question. I've tried to answer it throughout. Okay, again, what I would suggest is take that article and write it out. Okay? That will serve you better than any explanation I can give. ठीक है. Now the thing is, okay, so मेरे लिए एक advantage है कि अब आप देख सकते हैं मेरे बाल सफेद हो गए हैं, right? By now I've written on so many things, and in particular on blasphemy, that information is now like it's at my fingertips. Okay. So what I did is I went back over my previous articles. वो उसमें वो वजी उल हसन का जिक्र है, शफकत इमानुअल का जिक्र है, क्या नाम है उसका, ज़ाहिरा आसिया बीबी, सलमान तासीर वगैरह वगैरह. And then I just sort of crafted it in a particular order, and if you again, I mean, again, I don't, because you're talking about my article, so I have to refer to myself. This is not, I'm not trying to be arrogant here, but then I thought कि मैंने कहा कि यार अब इसकी opening attention gathering कैसे होती है? So I decided to start with Lahore. लाहौर है, लेकिन लाहौर में ये भी हो गया था, होने वाला था. And then once you start writing, you go into a flow on it, you see. So I mean that's really all I can say. Blasphemy is an issue that I have covered a great deal. So मेरे लिए इसमें लिखना कदरन आसान है. The challenge for me when writing about blasphemy is not to just write what I've written about 20 times before. That is the bigger challenge. It's not writing about it. और हाँ, दूसरा challenge इसमें ये है कि how do I write about this and not get killed? Honestly, how do I talk about this and not myself be labeled a blasphemer? Because ये भी माजी में हुआ है. So अल्फाज का चुनाव इसमें काफी अहम हो जाता है, not just from a writing point of view but also from the point of view के I like to have this bad habit called breathing that I would like to continue, and it'll be very difficult to do that if someone chops my head off. It's not a very pretty head, but I do like to keep it on my shoulders.
Okay.
So I don't know if that
Okay.
answers your question.
Amazing. Okay, Kainat,
Yeah.
you may ask your question. Okay, so Kainat says her question is, throughout your career, how have you
Yeah.
investigated a complex and controversial issue and produced an impactful piece on that
Yeah, I've
topic?
read it. मेरे
Okay,
सामने. I think I already answered that right now. I mean, देखिए, blasphemy से ज़्यादा controversial तो कोई issue है ही नहीं ना इस मुल्क में. यहाँ पर what is in blasphemy, इल्जाम सबूत है, सजा मौत है. ठीक है, आपको मार डालेंगे इससे पहले कि वो सवाल पूछेंगे कि इस बंदे ने किया था या नहीं किया था. और कितनी अफसोस की बात है, क्योंकि सही बुखारी में एक हदीस है, हदीस नबवी है, कि एक इंसान के लिए गुनहगार होने के लिए इतना ही काफी है कि वो हर सुनी सुनाई बात बगैर तस्दीक आगे कर दे. तो यहाँ पर तो आप बगैर तस्दीक लोगों के सर कलम कर देते हैं जी.
Definitely.
So when I'm talking to a more religious audience, I usually give them this, and that's also the thing ना, कि you have to know your audience. एक दफा हम फेक न्यूज पर बात कर रहे थे और मेरे जो बाकी पैनलिस्ट हैं वो बात कर रहे हैं कि दिस इज इट्स अनएथिकल एंड वोल्टेयर ने ये कहा था, रूसो ने ये कहा था. मैंने कहा भाड़ में जाए यार, आप कराची में बैठे हुए हैं. हु द हेल केयर्स व्हाट वोल्टेयर एंड रूसो सेड? आप अपने कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्यों नहीं बात करते? सो द पॉइंट इज कायनात जी के look, you have to, like, again, you see, you have to keep reading. It's not, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि एक दिन आप मतलब आपने पिछले 5 सालों में कुछ पढ़ा ही नहीं और आपका ख्याल है कि आप एक दिन में वो सारी रिसर्च कर लेंगे. नो, इट्स अ कंटिन्यूअस प्रोसेस. हाँ, आई मीन ऐसा अभी अगर मैं यहाँ पे बैठ के अगर मैं 15 क्रंचेस करूं और फिर मैं देखने लगूं कि यार मेरा 6 पैक नहीं बना, ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता ना. इट्स यू हैव टू keep working at it. You have to keep working at it. So I would again suggest you to read everything you can get your hands on all the time. There are no shortcuts. And speaking of shortcuts, एक चीज मैं आपको बताऊंगा, never ever let AI do your thinking for you. Ever. I mean, I will tell you as an editor, अगर मुझे कभी पता लगे कि परवेज हुडबॉय ने भी अपनी चैट जीपीटी यूज किया ना अपने आर्टिकल में, उसके बाद वो बंदे को मैं छापूंगा नहीं, कभी भी नहीं. Because that is a shortcut to thinking. And the one asset we have is this spongy thing inside our skull. अगर इसको आपने नहीं इस्तेमाल किया ना तो फिर कोई फायदा नहीं है. आप हमारे और जानवर में कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Yeah, so I'm a little passionate about this. Okay,
so,
good books. There's lots of good books, man. Depends. I mean, किस किस्म की? I mean, ये सारी पीछे पड़ी हुई है. This is 1/10 of it. Okay, I'm still sorry. This is what I spend all my money on.
okay,
I mean,
so
history
there
में.
is
Okay, sorry. जी.
okay. There is one question for I have in mind. I mean, there are. I have seen in your writing you have always covered the alternative topics. Is something that is not there. For instance, when you are writing about technology, you are writing about, for instance, climate change, social issue, limbs. This is all stuff that very few people are writing. So my question is specifically, why do you think these issues are important, far more important, considered to what is happening in mainstream? Because since science writing and technology writing is also a niche specific. So
Yeah,
what is the why?
I've also written on the qualities of mushrooms, which I love, and also on कि पाकिस्तान में cannabis क्यों उगानी चाहिए. In fact, अभी सदर पाकिस्तान ने जाते जाते cannabis authority की भी authorization दी है. You can look that up. It's called High Time. I write about this because everything else bores me. Because everyone else is doing everything else. I mean, अभी अगर आप इस वक्त डॉन का ऑपेड, वो थोड़ा सा दूर पड़ा हुआ है, डॉन का ओपिनियन कॉलम उठाएं So what? There are 5 articles and all of them are on politics. देखिए, अब आप समझें कि एक बाजार है और एक लाइन में 10 लोग बन कबाब बेच रहे हैं, कितने चलेंगे, कितने बिकेंगे? So I would rather be the shop that's selling something a little bit different, you know, and that keeps me engaged. It keeps me interested. And these are the things. Look, politics bores me. Everybody, आप कहीं भी जाए, मैं इसलिए मैं किसी व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में शामिल भी नहीं होता. लोग मुझे ऐड करते हैं, मैं माजरत करके निकल जाता हूँ. यहाँ मैं किसी के साथ फटा कर लेता हूँ, जान पूछ के कि वो मुझे निकाल दें. Because it's the same nonsense over and over again. Why that I'm not even going to be satisfied with it. And but I also get paid for it. And you know, थोड़ी सी हल्की फुल्की शोहरत भी मिल जाती है, which I love. Okay, so a point is कि if I'm doing the same thing that everyone is doing, then why do it? You know, इससे बेहतर है कि बंदा कोई अपनी नीश उस पे काम करे. You know, I mean ये Henry Ford, arguably the first automobile. तो उससे लोगों ने पूछा कि यार, do you ask the public what they want to write, what they want? And he was like, नहीं. He was like कि अगर मैंने public से पूछा होता, वो कहते थे कि हमें ज़्यादा तेज घोड़े चाहिए. Nobody would have thought of making a car. Do something unique, no? Do something unique. Why would you want to be one of the crowd when you can stand out if you can? So, I mean, if that answers your question. Also, I just enjoy research.
Amazing. Okay, one more thing. Mariam has a question for someone who is a researcher and now they have to disseminate and translate their research into writing. I mean, in the whole media, they are mostly not very much what you could say welcoming about the research stuff. So, how is any few tips or any way so we can transmit that?
Okay. Acha, obviously, without knowing what branch of, can you ask her to be a little more specific?
She belongs to space sciences, space physics, space science, astronomy.
Can we talk to her? Or yeah, उसने आपको message.
No, I guess. She put
नहीं
over
यार,
a message.
देखिए, I would as an editor, I would love it यार. I mean, देखिए, अब अच्छा टाइमिंग भी होती है ना. टाइमिंग भी होती है. जैसे कि फॉर एग्जांपल अभी ये जो भारत ने चांद पर भेजी थी, क्या है, चंद्रयान, right? I think that would be the time for an article like that. Yeah, in fact I wrote an article. Again, इधर उधर से सारी information gather करके, मेरी उसमें कोई original research तो नहीं थी as such, but it got published immediately, and not just because I wrote it, because that was timely. You see, so again, you see, the thing is कि now this is not an easy thing, Mariam ji. Okay. You may have a lot of research, but you also have to have the writing skills to be able to hook someone with it, you know. I would be very interested in it, but again, it will be very difficult for me to say what, you know, how to publish it without knowing exactly what's being talked about. I mean, that's the best I can do right now. And yes, most publications aren't, but if you keep trying, inshallah, you will find something. You have to be, इसमें है ना आपकी मतलब you have to have बहुत मोटी चमड़ी होनी होती है. You have to be able to take rejection over and over again without getting disappointed.
Okay, so well, since we are communicate what's in my mind.
I think I've answered that.
Okay.
Practice.
Any other question which have been covered, because a lot of things have been covered within a limited time, and especially such a diverse our talk has been. Any other questions? Okay, I guess we are done. But one last question which I have. Could you point out, I mean, with time as a writer, how could you identify your audience, and how could you, what is the procedure of feedback? Because with time, with time.
Yeah, देखो एक जमाने में वो comment section Dawn का होता था, वो अभी उन लोगों ने थोड़ी देर के लिए बंद किया हुआ है. That was great. I used to really enjoy that. You know, sometimes people give you feedback on email. Sometimes they give you death threats. Sometimes you get a lot of feedback on social media. So, there's various different things. कभी कभी आप मतलब ये बोट बेसिन पे घूम रहे होते हैं तो कोई एका दुका बंदा भी मिल जाता है कि यार वो बहुत अच्छा था. So that's great. There's no feeling like that in the world, man. I would never get bored of that. I will never get bored of that. So ये चीजें हैं. Again, देखें, no shortcuts. You have to keep practicing. It is work. It is a lot of work. Okay, it's like giving birth to a watermelon. Okay, it's like a strange metaphor to use, but it's appropriate because it can be painful but also very satisfying.
Okay, so I think since we are up for our time, I would really like to thank you, and I could not emphasize anymore. I mean, how enriching those. I mean, you have squeezed a lot of stuff within an hour or more. It has been a
My pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to aspiring writers because this is a lot of the advice that I wish I could have received much earlier in my career. So it's always been a pleasure. It's always a
uh,
pleasure.
they have been क्या कहते हैं, buzzing in the WhatsApp for your talk, and when they're enjoying, I would definitely send you the feedback.
Please
And
do.
uh,
Please do.
and it was an immense pleasure. Thank you, Zara. Thank you for that.
Anytime.